Emily walked into a small tea shop in town, her heart heavy with the blind date Aunt Mary had set up for her. She spotted a man in a black t-shirt who looked quite overweight and had a face full of fat.
Are you the blind date introduced by Aunt Mary, John?
The man put down his phone and extended a hand towards her.
You must be Emily.
Emily nodded, noticing the dirt under his nails, and briefly shook his hand out of courtesy.
Wow, those diamond nails must have cost a lot, right?
Not really.
Not really? How much exactly?
25 per diamond.
So expensive. Let me tell you, women shouldn't be too materialistic. After we get married, no more fancy nails. You need to keep them short, otherwise, you won't be able to do housework properly.
His tone was serious, not joking. Emily was speechless and reminded him.
Sorry, Mr. John, but I am not your future wife.
He took a big sip of his tea and chuckled.
I know, you girls are just shy. We've been here for a while. Why are you just standing there? Go get a cup of tea. It's on me.
Honestly, Emily wanted to leave, but out of courtesy and respect for the matchmaker, Susan, who was her mom's childhood friend, she went to get a cup of tea. When she returned with her tea, John glanced at her and frowned.
You got a large cup with a milk cap? Do you think I'm an ATM?
I already paid for it myself.
John's expression softened slightly.
That's more like it. But just this once, okay? Don't order such expensive things in the future. I don't like materialistic women. What's your educational background?
Master's degree.
Women with high education levels are hard to marry off, but I don't mind.
What's your educational background?
High school graduate. If the college entrance exam questions weren't so stupid, I would have gotten into Tsinghua or Peking University.
Emily chuckled. Is this what Susan meant by a good match? Suppressing her anger, she gritted her teeth and asked.
Where do you work?
John slurped the last of his tea loudly.
I don't have a job right now. The job market is too chaotic. Several companies wanted to hire me, but I didn't go because I didn't like their prospects.
Emily was speechless. She couldn't believe there were people who made such excuses.
How much do you earn?
Not much, just enough to support myself.
I see you women, no matter how much you earn, you spend it all. Living paycheck to paycheck, right? From now on, I'll help you save your salary. If you need money, you can get it from me. No more fancy nails or iPhones. I don't like materialistic women.
At this point, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her bag and stood up to leave.
Sorry, Mr. John, I don't think we're suitable for each other.
As soon as she walked out, he chased after her, shouting.
Don't go!
I didn't say I disliked you.
Just then, a young man on a motorcycle passed by and greeted John.
Hey, John, is this your girlfriend? Where did you find such a pretty girl?
Before Emily could explain, John covered her mouth with his greasy hand, making her want to vomit from the smell of hair oil.
Yeah, she's my girlfriend.
It wasn't until the young man rode away that John let go of her. By then, Emily was furious. No matter how well-mannered she was, she couldn't tolerate this greasy man's actions. She immediately pushed him away and slapped him.
I told you, Mr. John, we are not suitable for each other. I hope you clarify our relationship to your friend.
When Emily got home, Linda was waiting.
Linda, Tone, curious how did the date go?
Emily, Tone, sad not well.
Linda, Tone, nagging Emily, you're not getting any younger. Don't be too picky. In a couple of years, you'll be 30, and it's harder for women to find a partner after 30.
Emily felt a bitterness she couldn't express. Was she being picky? Did Linda even see the kind of person Susan introduced her to? It was beyond her lowest expectations. But Emily didn't voice these thoughts. David passed away early, and Linda had raised Emily alone for many years. Recently, she had been worrying herself sick over Emily's marriage.
Emily, tone, reassuring. I know, Mom. I know you love me the most.
Emily thought that was the end of it, but after dinner, the greasy man sent her a message on WeChat.
John, tone, presumptuous, the car you drove today is nice. Let me use it from now on.
Emily, tone, confused. Why?
John, tone, instant reply, because I'm your man. When you have a man, the car should be his.
Emily looked at his message, feeling both angry and amused.
Emily, tone, frustrated. You're already mine, little thing. Why care about a car?
Unable to reason with him, Emily turned off her phone and didn't reply. A while later, Susan called.
Susan, tone, curious. Hey, Emily, how did the date go today?
Emily, tone, honest. Sorry, Aunt Susan, but I don't think we're a good match.
Susan, tone, anxious. How can you say that? He's perfect for you. Don't be too picky.
Emily chuckled coldly at the thought.
Emily, tone, final maybe, but that's it for now. I have something to do. Goodbye, Aunt Susan.
To Emily's surprise, the next morning, Susan came to their house. She was Linda's best friend from childhood. Linda made a nice meal to entertain her, and Emily had to put on a polite face. As soon as she arrived, Susan started praising John, urging Emily to settle the marriage soon.
Emily, tone, firm. Aunt Susan, I already said yesterday, we're not a good match.
Susan, tone, critical. Tell me why you think so.
Susan sat on the sofa, looking at Emily critically, pulling Linda aside to interrogate her.
Emily, tone, honest. He's not attractive, only has a high school education, and doesn't have a job. Not many girls would be interested in such a man.
Susan's face turned green with anger, and she started spewing insults.
Susan, tone, angry. Emily, don't be ungrateful. I heard you've had boyfriends before. You're not a virgin, so why pretend? Susan, tone, shouting. My son is a virgin. In the past, we wouldn't marry someone like you even with a huge dowry. Now, considering we're relatives, we're doing you a favor, and you don't appreciate it.
Linda couldn't stand her insulting Emily and chased Susan out with a broom. Narrator, tone, serious. Later, I learned from Linda that John was Susan's stepson. After Susan's divorce, she married Robert from the neighboring village. Robert had a son, John. Robert was often away for business, dealing in onions, and rarely came home, but it was said that he gave all his earnings to Susan.
Linda, tone, friendly. Susan hasn't given up on this marriage. She frequently calls me, urging you to get along with John. She says things like, we're all family, and there's no blood relation. If you marry him, I can save on the dowry.
Hearing her say these things every day made my ears hurt, so I blocked her. Not long after, I ended my vacation and returned to the provincial city for work. But I didn't expect Susan to often come to my house and cause trouble after I left.
Linda, tone, serious. Susan would make a scene at our house, even at the front door, claiming that you had accepted her dowry and must marry her stepson. But we hadn't taken a single penny.
Susan's antics attracted more and more onlookers, and people began to criticize my mom for not keeping her word. In a small village, gossip spreads quickly, and soon everyone knew about it.
Linda, tone, hopeful. I tried to reason with her, asking her to discuss things inside. In the end, I gave Susan 10,000 yuan and promised to help John find a job in the provincial city, and the matter was finally settled.
When I first heard about this, I was furious.
Emily, tone, angry mom, how could you give her money? This is extortion. We should call the police.
Linda, tone, hesitant, how can we call the police? What would the villagers think of me if I sent my own sister to jail? Linda, tone, pleading, please, just help John find a job, and I won't pressure you to find a partner anymore.
Emily, tone, serious, I won't help him. It's already lenient that I'm not reporting her for extortion.
Linda started crying on the phone.
Linda, tone, crying, Emily, please, I'm begging you. I only have one sister left. If she keeps making a scene, I won't be able to hold my head up in the village. Please help me, or I don't know how I'll get through this.
With no other choice, I reluctantly agreed. I couldn't understand why Susan was so determined to marry me off to her stepson. Was it just to save on the dowry? But Susan's husband had been saving a lot of money over the years, and the dowry in our area wasn't that high. 10 or 80,000 could get a good girl. Moreover, John wasn't someone who couldn't live without me. Why was he so fixated on me? Susan's family wasn't short of money, so why did she extort $1,000 from my mom? With these questions in mind, I secretly contacted villagers from Susan's hometown and offered them some incentives to investigate her for me. Susan had bullied my mom and me so much that I needed to find some leverage against her. I introduced John to an advertising company we had worked with before as a telemarketer. The job didn't require a high degree, and as long as he didn't bother me anymore, it suited him well. After graduating with a master's degree, a few of my classmates and I started a gaming company. It's been 3 years now, and our company has gained some recognition in the industry. I've also become a notable figure in the field. John hadn't contacted me for several months after starting at the advertising company, but I heard he had become a sales manager there. His promotion was swift, and although I didn't like him, I had to admit he had some skills. This month, our company launched a new mobile game, which received rave reviews online. We wanted to capitalize on the buzz and promote it quickly, and I was in charge of the project. When I met with the advertising company to discuss the ad campaign, the person who came to negotiate was none other than John.
Hello, could you please explain your company's advertising plan for this project?
To my surprise, John couldn't articulate his thoughts clearly. His entire presentation was hesitant and unfocused, and the plan was simply to hire a celebrity spokesperson, who had nothing to do with our game.
I'm sorry, John, but we'll have to pass on this collaboration.
I extended my hand to shake his and left with my assistant. But I didn't notice the sinister expression on John's face. After work, I received a message from John saying that Michael wanted to invite me to dinner to apologize for the failed collaboration. Michael's company was small, but we had worked together several times with good results. I was puzzled why Michael didn't contact me directly and instead had John do it. However, since Michael had extended the invitation, I decided to go out of respect. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found no sign of Michael, only John and his rowdy friends.
Where's Michael?
John didn't answer and pulled me to sit down. His friends eyed me with ill intentions, making jokes.
Wow, she really is your girlfriend? I thought you were exaggerating. Nice job, John, you got the famous Emily.
My mind went blank. Girlfriend? When did I become his girlfriend?
Your girlfriend didn't even approve your project. We followed your advice for the proposal. Didn't you say you knew her preferences best?
John looked embarrassed, his face turning red. He stood up, downed a glass of wine, and spoke harshly.
Sorry, guys. I'll use my salary to cover this month's performance. This woman needs to be taught a lesson. I'll deal with her later.
John, don't say that. We still need to rely on you.
John regained his composure and tried to put his arm around my waist. I quickly stood up to avoid him. Everyone stared at me as I spoke clearly.
You must be mistaken. I'm not his girlfriend. We've only met once, and I'm currently single.
As soon as I finished speaking, the room buzzed with whispers.
What? Emily isn't John's girlfriend?
He got promoted because of his supposed relationship with Emily. Turns out he was lying.
I thought John was some hidden rich guy. How else could he get someone like Emily?
Hearing the murmurs, John's face turned beet red. I continued.
My rejection of your project has nothing to do with personal feelings. I simply believe your company's proposal doesn't align with our game's marketing strategy. I hope you keep trying. Enjoy your meal and drinks. I have to go. I'll cover the bill tonight.
As I turned to leave, John grabbed me tightly.
You're not leaving. It's bad enough you caused trouble at home, but now in public too? You've embarrassed me.
I struggled to break free, but John slapped me hard.
Susan was right. Women need to be disciplined.
I covered my face in disbelief. Did this man really dare to hit me? Fuming with anger, I grabbed a beer bottle and smashed it over John's head. Soon, blood started to trickle down from his scalp. John touched the blood on his head, clenched his fist, and punched me in the shoulder. Wearing high heels, I couldn't bear the weight and fell down.
I'm your man, and you dare to hit me.
In that instant, I mustered all my strength and kicked him in his most sensitive area. John fell to the ground in pain. His friends, who were watching nearby, were terrified and immediately called the police. When the police arrived and took our statements, they concluded it was a mutual altercation. John insisted I was his girlfriend, so the police mediated and let it go. I had been slapped twice, while John's head was bleeding, and he was in too much pain to leave the hospital anytime soon. I just needed to apply some ice, and I was fine. However, this incident led to rumors within the advertising company and the industry that I was his girlfriend. I had no choice but to post several clarifications on social media, stating that I was single. I even messaged Michael to explain that John was not my boyfriend and clarified it countless times before the rumors finally died down. Without my support, John was demoted from his sales manager position to the lowest level of telemarketing after being discharged from the hospital. He was eventually fired for absenteeism and failing to meet his targets. Harboring resentment, John spread rumors that I had advanced in my career because I was being supported by our company's president. What he didn't know was that our company's president was a woman and my graduate school roommate. Narrator, tone, cheerful. Just then, a young man on a motorcycle passed by and greeted John.
Hey, John, is this your girlfriend? Where did you find such a pretty girl?
Before I could explain, John covered my mouth with his greasy hand.
John, tone, proud. Yeah, she's my girlfriend.
It wasn't until the young man rode away that John let go of me. By then, I was furious.
Emily, tone, shouting, I told you, Mr. John, we are not suitable for each other. I hope you clarify our relationship to your friend.
I immediately pushed him away and slapped him. Recently, I focused on my work, but then I received a call from my mother.
Emily, something terrible has happened at home.
Mom, what's wrong? Don't worry, I'm here.
Emily, it's bad. Susan brought people to our house, making a big scene, saying we had an agreement for you to marry her son. Now, everyone in the village is laughing at us, saying you have high standards but will end up marrying someone like him.
Mom, don't panic. I'll come back right away.
I took leave from work and bought the earliest high-speed train ticket back home. As soon as I arrived at the door, Susan was there with a group of people, making a racket.
Oh, Emily, you're back. Susan is here to take you as my daughter-in-law. You'll be part of our family now, and I'll finally enjoy some blessings.
I told you, I don't like your foolish son. This is an arranged marriage.
Susan gave John a look, and he stepped forward, dressed in red, holding a cheap bouquet.
Honey, I'm here to marry you. I know I was wrong before, but I'm your man, and you should forgive me. And from now on, stop doing those public-facing jobs. It's not respectable.
John, can't you hear? I said I don't like you, you fool.
The villagers laughed heartily. Susan's face turned red with anger, and she started cursing.
Emily, who do you think you are? You think you're too good for everyone. I know you've had a boyfriend before. You two must have been together intimately, right? I'm doing you a favor by letting you marry into our family. Don't be ungracious.
Yeah! Don't be ungrateful. Women should get married and have children.
My mom, who had been listening to Susan insult me, couldn't take it anymore. She slapped Susan hard.
Jessica, I treated you like my only sister, and you insult my daughter like this? Have you no shame?
My mom is a gentle person, usually timid, but seeing Susan insult me, she stood up for me. Susan, in pain, fell to the ground, wailing.
Oh, I'm being hit. I can't live like this.
Susan's crying was unbearable, so I pulled my mom inside and locked the door. John tried to push the door open, but I kicked it, and he instinctively covered his groin and left. I have to say, Susan is really good at crying. She wailed from morning till night without stopping. People who knew she was here for a marriage proposal might think someone had passed away in her family, given her mourning. Helen came home that night, and the next day, the crying continued for several days. Suddenly, I received a call from someone I had asked to investigate Susan.
Miss Emily, I took your money and kept a close eye on Jessica. I found out she often watches a very handsome live streamer and even sends him gifts. The streamer often thanks Jessica for her generous gifts.
How could Susan afford such expensive gifts? And frequently, too.
Then it hit me. The reason Helen wanted me to marry her stepson was to avoid paying a dowry. She must have used the money Robert gave her to reward the streamer.
Well, Jessica, my dear Susan, you're in for a surprise.
The next morning, Susan arrived at my doorstep, making a commotion as usual.
Susan, stop shouting. I've agreed to the marriage. Come in and let's discuss it.
Susan and John were overjoyed.
That's great, Emily. I knew no woman would refuse marriage.
Linda held my hand, worried.
Don't do anything foolish, my daughter.
Mom, don't worry. This marriage won't happen.
Once inside, I poured tea for both of them and adopted a serious tone.
Susan, since I'm marrying into your family, both sets of parents should discuss the wedding arrangements.
Yes, yes.
I then suggested that Susan stay overnight to discuss the wedding plans further.
Honey, I'll stay and sleep in the same room with you.
It's bad luck to sleep together before marriage. Call your father. He should be here to discuss the wedding.
John agreed, but Susan's face visibly paled, and she seemed unsteady on her feet. That night, I had Linda share a room with Susan and asked her to secretly take Susan's bank card and ID. I drove to the town's ATM and printed out Helen's bank statements, then had Linda return the items quietly. As expected, Helen had spent over $50,000, given by James, on tipping online streamers within a year.
I wonder how James would react to this. He worked hard selling onions abroad, rarely coming home, only to have his wife spend all the money on streamers.
James rushed back as soon as he heard his son was getting married. Linda prepared a large meal to welcome them, and at the dinner table, I met Robert for the first time. Although they had been married for several years, Susan rarely visited our family, and I had been working and studying away from home, so I had never met Robert. As soon as Robert saw me, his eyes lit up. He shook my hand enthusiastically and kept putting food into my bowl.
So you're Emily? Wonderful, just wonderful.
Robert patted John's shoulder with satisfaction.
You're a lucky guy to marry such a good wife.
I smiled and said,
Robert, since both families are here, let's discuss the wedding. How much dowry are you planning to give our family?
At the mention of the dowry, Susan couldn't sit still.
Why should we give a dowry to our own family?
Robert glared at her, and she immediately fell silent. Robert turned to me and said,
Emily, our family is fortunate to have you as a daughter-in-law. You name the dowry.
I smiled faintly and said,
128,000.
This amount was not much in our area, especially since I was bringing a car and a house as part of my dowry. However, their family probably couldn't even come up with 10,000. Robert shook his head and said,
That's not enough, Emily. You have a master's degree, you're beautiful, and you have a good job. That amount is too little.
I'll make the decision. We'll take out all 600,000 of our savings, give your family 280,000 as a dowry, and keep the rest for your wedding expenses. Robert glanced at Susan.
Isn't that right?
No way! She's not pure. We agreed not to give a dowry.
Nonsense. How can we not give a dowry? Our family can afford it. Besides, whether she's pure or not, she's more than good enough for our son.
Yeah, Mom, just give it.
I couldn't help but laugh at Susan's embarrassed expression. I shook my head and said,
TSK, it seems your family can't come up with the money.
Robert and John turned to me.
What do you mean?
Susan, do you want to tell them, or should I?
Susan remained silent, so it seemed I had to speak up myself. I took out the bank statements I had printed overnight and handed them to Robert.
Here's the money you've worked so hard to earn.
Susan has really kept up with the times. All your savings have been used to tip online streamers.
Susan, enraged, threw her drink at me.
Emily, you set me up. You set me up.
You're lying. I didn't do it. I didn't do any of it.
Robert looked at the bank statements with a dark expression. He slammed the table and yanked Susan by her hair, pulling her out of her seat.
Is this true?
No. She's lying. How could I do such a thing?
If it's not true, then show us the family savings.
Where's the money I gave you? If it's not true, show it to us.
Susan clung to Robert's leg, begging for forgiveness, her head bleeding, but she didn't care.
I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me.
You shameless woman. I work hard outside, and you spend all my money on tipping men. Did you spend time with them too?
That was the money for my wedding.
When John heard that his stepmother had spent his wedding money, he was furious. He grabbed Susan by the hair and started slapping her, while Robert stood by and did nothing. Susan was beaten until her face was covered in blood, crying and begging.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. Susan, I'm your only sister. Help me.
Linda looked down, wavering. I held her back, telling her to call the police if she wanted to help Susan. Linda called the police, but it would take some time for them to arrive. John, unsatisfied with just slapping, started kicking Susan. She was covered in blood, struggling on the ground. When Susan was barely conscious, the police arrived and arrested John. But he was unwilling and shouted hysterically.
This woman spent all our money. Why can't I hit her? She ruined my chances of getting married.
Talking about marriage, John looked at me with a calm yet terrifying gaze. Taking advantage of the police's distraction, he pounced on me and started tearing at my clothes. I cried and struggled, and the police immediately handcuffed John.
What are you doing? Stop.
I laughed. Attempted assault, another charge.
I'm still a virgin. I can't go to jail. I haven't even gotten married.
But I just found it amusing. In the end, Susan was severely injured and hospitalized, while John was sentenced to 10 years for intentional harm and attempted assault. Just then, a young man on a motorcycle passed by and greeted John.
Hey, John, is this your girlfriend? Where did you find such a pretty girl?
Before I could explain, John covered my mouth with his greasy hand, making me want to vomit from the smell of hair oil.
Yeah, she's my girlfriend.
It wasn't until the young man rode away that John let go of me. By then, I was furious. No matter how well-mannered I was, I couldn't tolerate this greasy man's actions.
I told you, Mr. John, we are not suitable for each other. I hope you clarify our relationship to your friend.